Well, good afternoon, and good afternoon to our esteemed leaders who are sitting in the front row and who have told me in half an hour that they will be present. They will not be grading my any grammar or content, so I appreciate that. I want to thank you all for the invitation to come here today, and I want to thank especially all of you who on a Thursday afternoon when the weather is wonderful and you have many things that you could be doing with your time, including writing papers and completing thesis and doing work. You've come today to listen, and so I appreciate you being here. Chaplain Karen, thank you for that wonderful introduction. I'll carry you with me everywhere I go here, and I am as famous for being the intelligence officer, a senior intelligence officer, as I am for being the MC at the Army ball, which I don't remember anything about that night except I was a little bit funny, which gives you an idea of how low the bar is as a general officer. But I think I still meet people today who say, man, weren't you the MC at the ball? I said, I'd like to think I've done something since. But I'm very honored to be here today, and as I was talking to the leadership of the institution, the reason I accepted the invitation is I've been the recipient of the product of this great institute. People that have served on my staff, who have assisted me in my thinking, who have contributed to the team by bringing diverse points of view, an understanding of the interagency, a respect for other people's backgrounds. And so when the invitation came, as an opportunity to talk very broadly about leadership or anything I felt like, since today officially is the last day that I actually signed out today. I still have about 2 more weeks of things I have to do for the Army, but as I was getting out to wear a beret or not to wear a beret, I thought, there's no sergeant majors around. I think I'll leave it, but I carried it with me. I carried it with you. But in any event, when I was asked to come, I was, didn't hesitate to accept. Because I think those who have benefited from mentorship have an obligation to give back, and those who have had an opportunity for experiences at the levels that you aspire to, if there's anything that we can share to speed your development or to help you in your thinking or just to encourage you as you pursue your own dreams, I think we have an obligation to do that. It is the gift that we give back. So I was asked a few minutes ago, what is it that I'm going to do when I retire? I actually am not retired, so I'm going to give myself the break of not knowing what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. But one thing I will do for sure is to give back to those and to pay forward all the mentorship that I received. To be retired as the senior intelligence officer of the Army it's just an improbable story in itself. But I know that I'm here because so many took so much time to develop me. And so part of the reason I'm here is because of that. I also was just curious about the real estate here. When I Googled it, I'm like, how did they get this place? And I got the history on the way in. Marry rich and be an entomologist. So when I heard the history that this was the house of an entomologist, all I thought was civil servants back then made a lot more money than we make today. So I'm glad to be here. I was given a pretty broad topic, leadership, which you can go a lot of different directions. And then I thought about really the purpose of this institute and potentially just reflecting on obligations to prepare yourselves as strategic leaders to work in a intergovernmental or interagency environment, some of the things that I've learned. You only have to look at the headlines, and she mentioned this product that we put out as a former director of CIA. We called it Global Hotspots. It had to have a map because I was pretty sure if I mentioned Tunisia, there was a 50% chance that half of the staff wouldn't know where that was. My goal with this one-page product, there was a map on the front, it was a cartoon of the world with big, bursts. But on the next page, it talked about anything that had happened overnight in the area of emerging crisis or instability or humanitarian relief. But it forced them to focus on, from a classified perspective, what it may have broken overnight that might create a need for our Army to respond. My real goal was just to make sure if they'd stopped watching Where's Waldo, that they knew where some of these countries were. Because my generation, very focused on the Middle East for so long, generation previous, maybe we could find most of the Eastern European countries if we played. But we had places in the world that we didn't have a good feel for, and it was important if we were going to put soldiers or service members or civilians in harm's way, that the leaders of the Army staff could immediately dial in. But global hotspots, one of my favorite things. I also used to call it, threat for idiots. As I tell my Army staff to say, look, I get up every day and read 3 hours of traffic, so all you have to read is one slide. So bear with me on this. But you can look at the security environment that we have today, and you've discussed the reasons the world seems to be moving so quickly and instability is so rife. You've had those discussions, but you can understand why I would come today to meet the future leaders of our national security environment, because we need to attract the best. We need to tell you that of the many, many claimants on your intellects and the many, many claimants that will ask you to devote yourselves to things, our country needs you, and your countries need you, for those of you from other places, to dedicate the great gifts that God gave you, and to participate in finding solutions and to making recommendations that lead to good policy. And so I come out of sincerity to appeal to you, in whatever way you choose to serve, that you do choose to serve, and that you stay involved in the world and you contribute in a way that benefits all of humanity. So it's a pretty sincere reason. On my own path to this, I recently had my retirement ceremony with 600 of my closest friends, only 100 of whom were relatives, and they won the lottery to attend. But I began my career with an early idea. I'm the product of two English teachers. I born in New York, grew up in New Hampshire. Mother and father were English teachers, so you will note not a lot of passive voice in the way I describe things. Well, if you do, just don't note it. But my father was eventually got into public education, where he dedicated his life to sort of in-school services of PBS. And so I grew up in a family where public servants and service to community was more or less the norm. And I had an idea that I wanted to do something like that, but was pretty sure with 4 brothers, so that being my experience with people I would teach, coach, and mentor, that I needed to get something that would allow me to be around crew-served weapons, so if they weren't persuaded by me, I could take some other path. So I was interested as a child who was often fed history and books on politics, and looking for some way to follow my interests in sort of international relations and comparative politics and the way states resolve crisis. I was interested in finding a way to turn that into my profession. And it led to sort of an understanding that there is a need to defend our country, there is a role for defense, there is a role for intelligence. And so by the time I left high school, I sort of had a little vague idea that in addition to what my second grade teachers, I was apparently voted most likely to take over a third world country in elementary school. My teachers are still telling me that. And the only thing I can figure is when you grow up with 4 boys, with a mother who is very careful about any sort of gender-specific guidance, I didn't realize I was supposed to sit in the back of the classroom and be polite, so I would sit in the front and my hand was up all the time. And I was very verbal, as most girls are, I suppose. So by the time I left elementary school, they had a plan, and my teacher said, we were just hoping you would channel your leadership for some good. So I joined ROTC when I was in college at the University of New Hampshire, because I was interested in potentially a career in the military, very specifically interested in a career in intelligence, military intelligence, or potentially leaving the military and doing foreign service. Then I got a view of the foreign service exam, and I said I better stay in the military because they'll understand me better. High energy, low intellect. This will work for me. But my military career, and I'm happy to be in the place which used to be a Soviet station, My military career, like many people who started in the early 80s, began with just the fascination of the Cold War and the Russians, and I spent my first 3 years staring at them during field training exercises, wishing I spoke Russian and Czechoslovakian so I understood what they were saying, but studying the Soviet threat and Warsaw Pact. And thereafter, I spent time in Korea because you asked to go to Korea before they told you to go. That was sort of our theory, and it turned out to be just a marvelous place to be an intelligence practitioner. But learned through the course of a 30-year career where I was managed carefully to be a leader. Because in the military, they throw you into the platoon and say, please don't break it. And you're surrounded by non-commissioned officers who ensure you won't, and they raise you. And you look over 3 decades, and it's from running 50 people, organizations of 50 to enterprises of 58,000. And it seems very natural because you're developed over time and your confidence grows in your ability to run global enterprises. So I've had the opportunity to develop as a leader. And I thank the Army for that and contribute to meaningful work and to serve around the world. I've also had the benefit of being raised as an intelligence officer, which makes it cool to get up in the morning when no one else is up and read through all the bad things that have happened in the world and then figure out how to envision operations that might close gaps and answer questions that lead to better policy. And have led small platoons to large global commands to, again, having about 58,000 people that look to me for some daily direction, which collectively I'm comfortable with because it's a really brilliant corps that I was associated with. So if you were to ask, how did you end up here and did you realize, it was like going to Disneyland every day. There was never a bad assignment. There were 25 jobs. There were twice as many bosses, but there was never a bad assignment because ultimately it was always about the same thing. What are we going to do today to prepare ourselves and to prepare our soldiers or to prepare our organization to contribute to the defense of our country, to the betterment of the command that we're part of, the operation that we're involved in. And it was very mission focused and it was about the team. And as I grew from working with a small platoon of Army sergeants that knew everything to running the enterprise in Korea, about 3,000 to 4,000 who are the intelligence team of teams that watch that threat every day, to the responsibility of being in charge of the intelligence operations for the military in Iraq was about 10,000 people that were working together. The more complex it got, the more I was reliant on other teammates and other cultures, other countries, other services, other agencies. And my interagency skills, which were pretty nascent, I needed to pick up the pace and begin to better appreciate how to help them succeed so that we could all succeed. And this would be my observation. One, to commend you for the choice of coming here, because you are learning through osmosis, but also through direct scholastic work, how to work with other organizations, whether they be NGOs or other government organizations or other services. You're beginning to appreciate, if you haven't before, the necessity for accommodating the cultures that they bring to the discussion, because you're all going to be working toward the same, trying to work to solve that same gnarly problem. And it is through differences of ideas and differences of cultures that you're going to come up with the best opportunity to solve the problems and solve them well. I am appreciative to my military career for placing me in particular positions where things were very complex. Where, as I was saying, the DMZ was nothing compared to sometimes the face-off between the military commanders on one side and the State Department on the other, as we were working toward the same goal of stabilizing Iraq or dealing with reconstruction. And the differences in our approaches were clashing. The differences in our patience level or the way we communicated were clashing, and we needed to work our way through those things. My phone explodes when it does that, so. But no problem.
Trouble with technology.
That's right. That's right. So as you think about your own, because as I was trying to get a feel for what do the students here, when you leave here, the instructors here, where do you go when you're contributing back? You have a myriad of things that are going to be your responsibilities. And understanding kind of the big national security issues are important, how you can approach solving those problems in large groups. having some excitement, there's many challenges. I mean, that's the nice thing I always would say until soldiers used to raise their hands and, man, the wars in the Middle East are ending, and I'm going to have to develop a relationship with my wife and my girlfriend, and they're different people. And exactly, the NCOs would disappear in the back of that guy and solve that problem. Because only in the Middle East are we allowed to have multiple spouses, and the soldier brought that culture back to himself. But I said to him, I said, look, if you're in the intelligence business, and unfortunately you're in the business of national security, it's a growth industry, unfortunately. This is a world where conflict is ever present, where great solutions are necessary, and great minds in trying to find solutions are going to be of premium importance. I know you've had Army senior leaders address you. And I guess I'd ask the question, do we have anybody else who's in the Army, or shall I start asking you to sing the preamble to the Army song, which, by the way, we dropped, much to my chagrin. So the Army has changed its beginning again. But I wonder if you've discussed regionally aligned forces and kind of the concept behind that. You know, the Army, as it emerged from 15 years in the Middle East, realized we developed a lot of depth at great expense, regional expertise and depth. Too late, candidly, too late. We came away with this conclusion that we want to always be to the left of the bang in every region again. When we made the decision to bring forces home, we gave up something, and we disengaged from the world, and we disengaged from that intimacy that we develop when we live in people's countries at their invitation. And so one of the things General Legere, our previous chief, proposed to the Secretary of Defense, it was supported and has been supported by the President as it fits his policy of engagement, was the concept of regionally aligned forces, which is we're going to have forces that are specifically trained, tailored, like our special operators, to work in particular regions of the world, who will rotate into those places or remain in those places, so that we can address one of the major shortfalls that we've had for a decade and a half, and that's a lack of cultural, social literacy, a lack of understanding of the cultures and the people that we purportedly are there to assist with stability. And the idea is to be to the left of the bang, ahead of the crisis, before the fire starts in the house, so that if it starts, we see it early. If it starts, we have friends in their security forces who we trust, who we understand, who can assist us by, with, and through them at getting the crisis resolved at the earliest opportunity. With that idea, we'll also work with our government partners who are forward stationed. It should not be the State Department's first experience of seeing the military when there's a crisis. They need to work with us all the time and know that we are not just about blowing up things, and although ultimately winning our nation's war against those who would oppose us is our primary mission, but we bring other capacity. We bring the ability to open ports where ports need to be opened. We bring the ability to create waterways and secure populations from people that would do them harm. We have those skill sets, and it's important that our young State Department professionals, as they grow, understand our full range of capabilities, so they think of us as an option, not in the lead, but potentially to support their stability operations as they go forward into dangerous places. It's also important that we develop really meaningful relationships with NGOs, that it's not the first time they're meeting us when we're all trying to solve and unpackage the Ebola crisis, that we have well-established relationships, that we have trust, that they know who we are, that they know what we stand for, that we are not an icon, we're not Hollywood. We are serious professionals that are in the business of securing other people's, lives in some cases, and promoting stability. And so the idea of regionally aligned forces is the one that, as an intelligence professional, obviously I'm interested. I don't want my soldiers studying the Krasnovians. I want them living, breathing, working with other countries, militaries, their security folks. I want us having an early indication if there's something wrong with those security forces, that internally there's decisions they make that would be inconsistent with what our values are. And we're providing that intelligence back to our country. But also building relationships of seeing their talent and getting it to places like this, so when they grow and assume more responsibility in their countries, they have the tools to work with other countries. So we're excited about regionally aligned forces. It's not, as someone cynically said, well, you're just looking for a mission in the Army. I said, no, actually, we're looking to get to the left of the bang, because we are the ones that go in when the house is burning down. We are the ones that fight to establish position. It would be great to be in the neighborhood to avoid the crisis, and to prevent the crisis and to assure our friends, than to have to come in after security's been lost. The benefits that we're seeing are a generation of people who have joined to make a contribution, who are getting very familiar with these countries around the world and these regions, and beginning to see that the world as a large place is a place that, as a soldier, they can make a difference with, working with interagency partners, working with other countries. Call it sort of strategic land power, a network of unified partners who see the world sort of the same way. Ladies and gentlemen, it's got to go. Thank you, sir. It's nice to see you both. So and we promise we're not going to ask any hard questions of them. So for us, kind of an exciting way for, if you think beyond the Middle East and you look at where our soldiers are going to be involved and what the Army's going to do, what Army intelligence will have the opportunity to do, this is our focus. For many of you who are not in the military, I see some who are, will be your partners out there. You'll have to help us understand how do your organizations operate, and what is it that you need in terms of help from us. What can your disciplines bring to our ability to do our jobs better? We'll look for that help. As the Army officers that are here that are lucky enough to be selected, and I guess we have some non-commissioned officers and warrant officers, I know that they come back broader from having been not just at this institution, but having spent time with all of you, because their leadership will be different as a result of it. So I promised myself that I would start speaking at a particular time and then end, so that we could open it up to questions. I would leave you with this. We need your talent in contributing to solutions, and however you decide to manifest itself, a life of service, a life of giving back to others and making the world a bit better. You're going to find like-minded people as you identify that as your goal, as you carry from here some of the ideals of this institution of how you can contribute. I would encourage you to do it. There is no reward that I can say other than when you're sort of like me at that midpoint where you have one profession behind you. I guess this is the second. I was a bit of a tyrant at Garrison Elementary School. I was pretty good at that. I was a good lifeguard. Best job I ever had. Didn't have to wear pants all summer. And then 34 years in service of the country, something I'm really, really proud of, the people that I've had a chance to work with. I look forward to whatever comes next, knowing that I've had the benefit of great development. I wish all of you the very best as you make your decisions. I look forward to your questions to see if perhaps if there's ways that we can talk about ways past for success. I'm open to that. So thank you very much for your attention.